Good morning, everybody, and welcome to another SACPA session. Today we have Jacquie Fenske, the acting leader of the Alberta Party, with us. SACPA acknowledges that this event takes place on the lands of the Blackfoot people and the Métis Nation of Alberta Region 3, and we pay respect to their past, present, and future cultural heritage, beliefs, and relationship to the land. SACPA is also very thankful for the continuing support we receive from the University of Lethbridge, Shaw Spotlight, and the Lethbridge Herald. Today, as I said, we have Jacquie Fenske, the acting leader of the Alberta Party, on the topic of the need for more voices in the public sphere for Albertans. Jacquie Fenske is an acting leader of the Alberta Party. She previously served as a PC MLA for Fort Saskatchewan-Vegreville and as a Strathcona County Councilor. She's the managing partner as well for her family pie shop. Thank you very much for joining us today, and we look very much forward to your talk.
Well, thank you, and thank you for the invitation. It's kind of been a whirlwind of change, especially every time there's an announcement with respect to the rules and regulations of COVID changing, because as you said, we do have a family business and our staff are always a little concerned, rightfully so, to ensure that they still have a position. So my yesterday was spent going from location to location, trying to bring everybody's spirits up and assure them that we're going to continue to do what we do and that serve our customers and that we will continue to be here. And then I got to go home. We live in the country, and I got to do farming things. So it's a wonderful province, and there's so many opportunities that we enjoy, and I love this province. And I know that my staff and my family, and that you as well, we all care about our province. And I thank you for having taken an interest in the public affairs of this great province. We're here today because certainly what you are looking to do is to connect business and government and how that we can work together. And so I want to talk to you about the Alberta Party, the state of politics in Alberta briefly, and what we all can do together to build a better province for Albertans. Many of you, and far too many for my liking, will be asking right now, who is the Alberta Party? Are we UCP or NDP light? Are we progressive or conservative? I'm asked these questions often, but insisting on defining the Alberta Party by comparing one party to another, one ideology to another, it's just too simple. So let me explain what the Alberta Party stands for by telling you why I am an Alberta Party member. When the current Premier was running to lead the Progressive Conservative Party, a party I proudly represented in the legislature, he requested a meeting with me, as well as others, looking for support from within caucus. He droned on about the importance of eliminating the deficit and paying down the debt. Now, I agree that these are laudable goals, but his enthusiasm for fiscal discipline ignored or avoided the effects it would have on Albertans. So I asked about that. The Alberta Advantage, the one that I fought for and represented in the legislature, was not only about low taxes and small government, it was about caring for Albertans, regardless of their status or their ability. So I used my parents as an example, seniors both, who may need to rely on government programs. And he said Alberta would have the best social supports in the country after the debt has been paid off. Didn't sit too well with me, because how's that working out? In the most ideal of scenarios, we're at least 10 years away from a balanced budget. We have no clear idea when we'll pay off our debt. And I know for sure, that my parents, if they need those programs, they need them now, not in 10 years. My mom is 87. My dad just turned 91 last week, and they unfortunately won't be around when the debt is paid off. The idea that Albertans must wait for government to clean up the mess government has made is absurd, and that is why I'm a member of the Alberta Party and why the Alberta Party is essential to Albertans. I knew then that the PC party was leaving me, and so I, like many, many other Albertans, saw myself as politically homeless until at least I found the Alberta Party. I loved Greg Clark's commitment to hard work and compromise. And though Stephen and Mandel and I did not see eye to eye always on every issue when we were in municipal politics, he represented the city of Edmonton, I represented the Strathcona County. I do know that Stephen has a deep love for Albertans from every walk of life, and I appreciate that. So together, these traits encapsulated the Alberta Party: caring, strategic, visionary. I love the energy of the members, so I knew I was home. I still agree with Premier Kenney that we cannot continue to spend in such an unsustainable manner. The government spends far too much money and needs to cut back. I mean, how about the $30 million for the war room that attacks cartoons and collects personal information? There is indeed frivolous spending in government. We always see waste when the money does not go to Albertans on programs to support their needs and dreams, but rather ideological pet projects. But this waste is not the only reason the Alberta Party is essential. The UCP isn't the only party to ignore Albertans and spend wastefully. The NDP have had their kick at the cat, and the province's small business owners, many of them that I know personally, the farmers, several of them who are my neighbors, and taxpayers can't afford that either. The Alberta Party is essential because Albertans need a party that stands for them. The NDP and the UCP have many things in common, believe it or not. They obsessively work for control, centralizing everything in Edmonton. When I was in municipal and provincial politics, I certainly saw that there was a need for smaller communities to be able to have access to government services. And whether it be political power or program delivery, this is what they do. They want it all to come to Edmonton. Most importantly, though, they are the same because boiled down to the bones, they both define their parties by their belief for what the role of government should be. The UCP believe that government is a problem to be solved. The path to prosperity is paved with reduced spending, reduced revenue, public service, and public programs cuts. It is ironic, I think, that a man who has made his living solely from the public purse thinks that it is the cause of all the world's problems. The NDP believe that government is the solution, regardless of the problem. Albertans are a problem to be managed through big government. A citizen initiative that is successful, well, it should be brought into the government tent. Bad behavior, as they perceive it, must be regulated. Personal initiatives stifled. And civil society, well, those tasks should be performed by the government. Special interests like unions will always be heard first. The vulnerable are political props used to gain the levers of power so as to expand government, but they're cast aside once power has been obtained. I've heard that many times while in my current role. Both are motivated by a quest for power because they place government's role as the center of their beliefs. Without power, they cannot shrink or grow government. They cannot bend it to their will. And standing in the way of that power is the people. It's Albertans. The Alberta Party, meanwhile, sees Albertans, not government, as the answer. We have no rigid view of government because government is not what matters. Albertans do. We must enable Albertans and allow them to be, well, Albertans. Because an Albertan empowered is an Albertan that can change the world. Albertans are a unique people. We're tough. On average, we work more than any other Canadian. We earn more too. And as a result of that hard work, and we earn more too as a result of that hard work, And we donate to charitable causes more than anyone else in the country, a fact that remains true despite an oil downturn and despite a pandemic. We believe that a good idea and hard work can change the world and make everyone a little bit richer. That obsessive hard work leads to another, at least in my mind, distinctly Albertan attitude. We play hard. We love our toys. We love our mountains, our bars, our restaurants. This pursuit of happiness is easy to mock, but believe me, it is beautiful and fun and fulfilling nonetheless. And we deserve these things. We believe that while it's up to the individual to roll up their sleeves and build something great, that individual was forged and supported by a community that also needs a hand up every once in a while. Usually in our great province, it is the hand of the successful, not government, that supports the community. But when the holes in the social safety net are too large and let too many people fall through them, we know that government must be there to catch them with programs that will help. We believe that those unable to meet the challenge of life deserve the care and respect to live with dignity. We have never believed one success must come at the expense of another. Every politician says this of those they represent, and they prattle on about the unique character of their constituents. I have lived it. I know that this is what Albertans believe, how they live, and what they want. And it's what the Alberta Party believes. We will enable individuals to grow their businesses, take care of their families, and build their communities. We will enact policies that assist individuals, ensuring that they are safe and have the tools available so that they can pursue their passions, provide for their families, and thrive in their communities. This requires a strong justice system, a world-leading K-12 and post-secondary education system, and a financially sustainable healthcare system that focuses on outcomes, not process. It demands a system of supports for the most vulnerable Albertans and allows them to live their lives as active members in their communities. We also believe in empowering our business owners by providing a stable investment environment with smart regulations and smart taxation, not high or low taxes or less or more red tape, but smart taxation, smart spending, and smart regulations. And what do we mean by smart? We mean informed, pragmatic, real-world common sense solutions. Taxation shouldn't be determined by an ideological view of government or to punish success, but to provide the best common good for the least amount of economic harm. And that's it, period. We empower those to start a business by ensuring low regulatory and financial barriers to entry. A balanced budget is key to this. And of course, it comes back to people. By building a province for individuals, families, and communities, businesses will have their most important element of success taken care of. And finally, we will be there for our communities. The provincial legislature does not know best. Those leaders closest to the people will know the needs, the wants, and the desires for their communities better than anyone in the provincial capital will. Municipalities then will be treated as key partners, not adversaries. And yes, this means we will disagree with actions taken by some municipalities, but it is the voters who live there to whom these leaders are accountable, not to MLAs. They will decide whether they like the direction their municipality is going or not. This philosophy would be extended to other civil society organizations, where synergy with publicly funded supports can ensure a strong network. Community leagues, religious organizations, charities, sports teams, youth groups, these are the pillars of a democratic society. They are closest to the people who rely on their services. Albertans cannot rely solely on government or solely on civil society. The two must work together to provide the social supports we need to ensure prosperity and dignity for all. The Alberta Party stands for the people of Alberta and their spirit, their values, their ideals. An Alberta Party government would empower Albertans to be their best, a formula that has worked for us before in this province. And with that in mind, it seems that the Alberta Party is an essential voice in our political landscape. Far too often, the chattering classes seem to revel in the development of a two-party system in Alberta. Why anyone would welcome that system is beyond me. Look what's happening in our legislature today. We miss the reasoned voices and the solution-driven responses of the Alberta Party. But let's look at this argument in another way. If you're pro-business, you vote UCP. Pro-union and pro-government, NDP. If you hate government, the UCP is your home. And a love for big spending, big brother knows best guidance from on high means you're voting NDP. Where does that leave Albertans, the vast majority who don't believe in these rigid views? Those with a pragmatic outcomes-based view on government, the ones who believe in small, effective government, that it is a force for good only so far as it empowers its citizens through smart spending, smart regulations, and smart taxation. In a climate of dangerous polarization where insults are the primary form of political discourse, we would have to invent the Alberta Party if it didn't exist. Because we know everyday Albertans, those who make their livings not on perpetual government positions or unions organizing, they don't insult each other. They don't pass out earplugs so as to ignore their co-workers' views. And they don't have strong views one way or the other about the role of government. The Alberta Party stands for Albertans, and Albertans, they are not polarized, angry partisans. They are neighbors and co-workers who work together to make a better province. And that is what the Alberta Party stands for and why it is essential in our political landscape. And so, if you believe in a government for Albertans that believes government and power is a means to an end, then I think it's time for you to join us. If you believe Albertans do their best when they're empowered to build, join us. And if you believe the senseless partisan dividing of Albertans does no good to building a better province, I welcome you to join us. The Alberta Party is here for you because it is here for Albertans. And I look forward to addressing and answering your questions.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Before we get started with the Q&A, I actually wonder if I may ask a question first, as using my moderator privileges here. How it seems like in Alberta, things are pretty ideologically driven these days. How would, specifically in politics, but I think in the whole general discourse, what would the Alberta Party bring to try and maybe change that a little bit, or how does the Alberta Party see that?
Well, thank you. And we are, I believe that we are enacting on some of that right now in how we are conducting ourselves currently, because we are looking and reaching out to the community for answers and for their input. Part of this is being driven by the two parties right now. They're saying life has to be one thing or the other. And as I said in my speech, Albertans are sort of, sometimes we really need a social safety net. Sometimes we want to be left alone. And so they hover back and forth between that. And what we need to do is, first of all, listen, which is what we do. We want to hear from those Albertans. We want to hear their solutions and be able to enact what it is in what we heard in legislation. And I think we've had some excellent examples of that with past members of the Alberta Party. I believe that it was Greg Clark who actually got some amendments through when the NDs were in government. And that comes from sort of putting your egos aside, sitting down and listening to all voices, and then trying to find a compromise. And maybe that even means changing how we make those decisions, inviting other members of other parties to sit down and find the solutions. I think we have to work together, and there has to be a willingness on the parties to do that. And the Alberta Party is willing to sit down and listen and work together.
Thank you. Our question is from Timothy, who is from the Lethbridge Herald, a reporter with the Lethbridge Herald. What is the Alberta Party's view on the COVID-19 pandemic and the UCP government response to that pandemic?
Well, Timothy, we'd have to go back way to the beginning. And unfortunately, we can't do a do-over at this point in time. But that's where our response is. And we've actually put forward a response, several months ago, saying we need to know what the goalposts are. We need to know what Albertans need to know what to expect from their government, where they're going to go. As a business person, I think one of the most stressful things has been changing on a moment's notice, basically. I just recalled about 3 weeks ago when we were allowed to have, we're in the hospitality industry, allowed to have patios. And here I was hauling patio furniture to our locations in a snowstorm. We tried to do our best that way. And so it's really stressful to not know what those goalposts are. And we've asked for regional solutions. We've asked for the identification of those goalposts and what makes those changes. And then we would expect that our government, if they had to make changes, because there's always new information, that they would come out with the reasoning. Because I always believe that if people understand the reasons, they are more apt to accept their new roles or their new responsibilities. But we would go, if we had to go back to the beginning, the first thing is we wouldn't throw out the information that that was created with respect to emergencies situations. I know that there was a plan, and that plan was discarded. So we need to recreate that plan, because this is not the only issue we're ever going to face with respect to a situation that is basically, worldwide. It's going to happen more and more. I mean, we've seen it with our province. It's the anniversary of the Great Fire in Fort McMurray this past week. And we need to know how we're going to handle those things. We need to learn. So now, going forward, Timothy, we need to learn from what our mistakes were. We need to learn as to what needs to be changed. I've said many times, the loss of lives from our long-term care facilities, that's tragic. And we can't let that tragedy not change how we do things. And so going forward, let's sit down and make sure that we've got a plan that takes care of our people.
Our next question comes from Knut Peterson. What is your stand on coal mining in the Eastern Slopes?
Well, we've had a very active group. We call them a super CA. There are about 3 or 4 of our constituency associations from the Lethbridge area, from Banff, Canmore, that have gotten together very early in this process and have sought to find information. They've held many calls, talking to people about water, talking to people, experts in coal mining, looking at what kinds of alternatives there could be with respect to green steel. And so we've been on this for quite some time. And first of all, we did call for the reinstatement of Peter Lougheed's position on coal mining in the Eastern Slopes. We are happy to see that has somewhat been reinstated, but of course, it's not retroactive to some of the issues, some of the exploration that's taken place, and so that's continuing on. And we would want that. We believe that our mountains and our clean water are imperative in our lives, that they need to be protected. And so I guess that would somewhat answer your question in the fact that if it's going to affect Albertans' lives and Alberta's security for the future with respect to clean water, and it's got to stop. And right now we need to sit back and we need to make sure that we have all of the information on the table. But I can tell you that our constituency associations out there have been fighting to preserve our mountains.
Our next question comes from Michael Patrikis. Does the Alberta Party support the idea of vaccine passports and or the vaccination of tens of millions of Canadians with an experimental vaccine, including children?
Well, we have to rely on our federal government, and we have to rely globally on the information that's coming. We don't have a position on vaccine passports. It's not something that we've discussed. I imagine that that's going to come forward, along with many other items that sort of have evolved and been brought up through the pandemic. We, as the Alberta Party, are looking to a policy session later in the year after we've elected our new leader. And so there are many things. Some of them will be controversial. Some of them, I think, will just sail through with respect to being passed as part of our platform. But I anticipate that there will be a great deal of discussion, and then we will have a position on that. But as for right now, we have not had a position on a vaccine passport, and that's something that the federal government is actually going to have to make a decision on. I believe that I need to protect others, and so I've had my vaccine. I have friends who have had transplants, particularly one good friend whose daughter had a heart transplant at 3 months. She can't protect herself. She relies on us to provide that protection, and so that we don't get sick. And she just doesn't have the ability to fight that off. So I feel that as a citizen of this world, I need to do my part.
Our next question comes from Trevor Page. How many paid up members in the Alberta Party? And will you run candidates in all constituencies at the next election?
Okay, so I can't give you a number off the top of my head. I don't have that number. I haven't looked up that number. I do know that it's growing. I can tell you that. It is certainly our intention to run 87 candidates in the next election. That's what we're working to right now, is to make sure our constituency associations are functioning, that they are ready to have nominations once our new leader is chosen. And we want those CAs established so that that's not something that the leader has to focus on. They can focus on the candidates.
Okay, our next question comes from Laurie Schultz, and it's a biggie, so it's probably going to take you a while to answer because it covers the gambit. Please comment on the Alberta Party's policies on minimum wage, universal income, OHS, childcare, economic recovery for women and marginalized, and K to grade 12 curriculum, ... So basically your whole party platform, I think.
Well, I'll give it a shot. I probably won't cover all things. And as I said, some of this is evolving because we will have a policy session later in the year. So let me give you a shot. First of all, let's do the curriculum because that's been so recent, and we've been very vocal on it. Our shadow cabinet minister in education, we have a shadow cabinet, by the way, I should just explain that. And so we have different people in positions that represent, that provide opinions and ideas on specific department areas. And Neil Cortash is our shadow cabinet minister in education. And he's been active. He's been on several panels. He is a teacher himself. And I know that he's given it, when this whole process started, when the curriculum came out, he gave it a very good read, a very measured, he wanted to make a measured response. And so he did his due diligence. And certainly this curriculum that we see is not age appropriate in many ways. And as a former teacher myself, I certainly see that rote learning has a place, but we also need to be able to have thinkers in the future who are able to take an idea and form another idea and form another idea. It's not allowing that. It's not developing that skill in our children when it needs to be developed at a young age. And so Neil has been, as I said, very vocal in saying that this curriculum is not acceptable. We need to go back to the drawing board. And I want to say, I mean, I was a PC MLA at the time when this was all started. And we were 2 years late in adopting it. We should have. The ND government then had 4 years to adopt the new curriculum because it was time. That curriculum the world has changed. The curriculum needs to change to reflect that. The NDs had 4 years to implement a new curriculum, failed to do that, and now we are left with this this version by the UCP. And as we can see, many of the school boards are not even going to pilot it. It's not where the world is at, and it's not going to be beneficial to our children's future. So that's that. One of the things that we're really focusing on right now is people with disabilities, the disabled community. And I mentioned it in my speech that often there are groups from society that are basically used as pawns in the process of getting a party elected. And I think that the disabled community has been left behind by this current government as well. And I'm not sure that they were totally supported by the previous government, but certainly there was a call out to say, you know, we're here to help you. And that's not acceptable. We need to actually be there and provide concrete support so that people can be an active member in their community. People learn, and it goes even back to the curriculum. People learn differently. Children autistic children have a different way of learning that's unique to each and every one of them, and we need to be able to support that, and we need to be able to support those children and those adults in our communities. And so that means we need to change, not them. So we want to look at things that way, and we've been spending some time gathering some information in that regards. Okay, what else did we have in there?
Okay, so let me read them all out again for you, just as a refresher. Minimum wage, universal income, OHS, childcare, economic recovery for women and marginalized, as well as the K to grade 12.
Okay, so on the minimum wage, we've been there supportive of the minimum wage. Universal basic income, I believe we have a CA, Constituency Association, that is bringing a policy forward a resolution forward to our policy meeting. So that will be a great discussion. We've had some discussion with the folks that are promoting basic income. It's what they've presented is slightly different than UBI. We're referring to it as basic income. But we truly know that fits. We need to find a way again for those people who are being left behind to be able to live with dignity. So that's in discussion where that's going to go. Stay tuned. Join us. Come to our become a member. Come and vote at the policy session. You know, that's how it goes, and it's a democracy, and it's the majority will form the opinion. Child care. We've always had a child care position, even in the last election, the last campaign. And that was that we had a proposal that the dollars followed the child, and so that it gave choice, but it also supported enhancing childcare, because we know that is a drawback for some, particularly women, in entering the workforce. And so, so I would say that we've been there and we continue to be there. Our version is slightly different than perhaps certainly than what the UCP has put forward, which is nothing, I think, except some dollars, and definitely different than the ND position. But we do have a position, and we do believe that, as I said, childcare is important in getting women in particular back into the workforce. As far as a position on what we're doing with respect to getting women back in the workforce and being an active participant in our economic renewal, I don't think we have anything specific right now. I know that our shadow cabinet minister has put forward some opinions in that respect, but we don't have a particular policy on that. Again, it's the time to be able to put things forward and to make sure that that becomes part of the Alberta Party in the future. That's probably several of them. We do have the Alberta Party puts forward a shadow budget. Neil Court, Joy. Mark Nakota is our shadow minister, and he and his team have continually put forward every year a shadow budget which reflects where we see the priorities of the Alberta Party. So I would encourage you to look that up. It is online, and that will give you a better idea of sort of where we're focused at this point in time. It changes, of course, yearly because, as I said, the world changes, but we do give it a good try. It's created by volunteers, and it certainly looks at what we need to do to move forward. And we also released in May of last year an economic recovery plan too. One of the things I wanted to mention about our shadow budget, this past shadow budget, our idea of what the corporate tax rate should be is different than the UCP's. But we had a lengthy discussion on that. Do we change it back to what we've proposed in the past, or do we leave it? And as a business person myself, I know that stability is really important in ensuring that businesses can grow and contribute to the economy, and thereby being a benefit to everyone. So after much discussion, we did say, you know what, it's more important to ensure that stability than it is to, again, go back to something at this point in time that we have supported in the past. So that's what you'll find about the Alberta Party. Like, we're willing to change. We're willing to look and compromise because, you know, I want my kids living here in the future, and I want their kids to be able to be as proud of this province as I am. And so it takes us as being adults in political parties to make things different. I know that coming for discussion, well, as long as it passes through the hoops up to policy session, will be a look at election reform. The world has changed, and so I want to see where that discussion goes, but we're certainly going to have that discussion as well.
Okay. Our next question comes from Laurie Schultz again. Would the Alberta Party approach to COVID pandemic from a, and then in quotations, keep Alberta health system from crashing, or would the zero COVID approach be applied as in New Zealand and Australia?
Well, as I said, hindsight is, great, but New Zealand, of course, an island unto itself, had the opportunity to really shut down its borders. We're part of a greater country, and right now, even now, we see people traveling between BC and Saskatchewan, even though that's not, that governments are looking against it. We would want to ensure that the health system is stable and sustained, and we take advice from our doctors and from the scientists as to the best approach. And so I don't think we've ever discussed zero COVID. I mean, that's in an ideal world, but there are too many things outside of our provincial jurisdiction that we would be able to do the same things that New Zealand did. But we would certainly want to ensure that our health system, and by listening to our health specialists, there probably are things that we should have enacted earlier so that we could actually all enjoy our May long weekend and our summer coming up.
Okay. Our next question comes from Michael Petrikis. What is the AB Party's position on Bill C-10?
That's the telecommunications, the federal telecommunications. I know that we've had some informal discussion amongst ourselves, but we do not have a formal policy at this point in time. So I would only be giving you sort of my perspective as far as what that conversation is. So I can't give you a party policy, a party position on that. Certainly something we need to continue our discussions. As I said, we've been talking informally amongst ourselves, but we haven't come up with an official position.
Okay. Knut Peterson, arguably, Alberta's NDP would be considered a centrist party in most places in the free world. Can you see the Alberta Party aligning with the NDP?
There are many things that that we and the NDP would see differently. I would have to disagree with you that the NDP would be considered a centralist party. Now, certainly in the global perspective, they are doing things to try to become more centrist. I think a lot of that has to do with their current leader. Their leader changes, and they are going to revert back to being far further left wing. You know that because they are aligned with their federal party. And until that break is made, they don't have the luxury of trying to really push themselves to the center. So no, I don't see us aligning with them because we do. As I said, sometimes we would agree with what they're doing. Other times when it comes to fiscal responsibility and how we should solve solutions, we probably align further to the right than they do if you're looking on a political spectrum. But as I said in my speech, that's too simple of a way to try to compare us. And it's too simple of a way to try to pigeonhole Albertans. So I would see if you need to do that on a political spectrum, they're further to the left than we are. We're far more central, but they lose their leader, and Rachel Notley is not going to be their leader for forever. And until they break that tie with their Fed counterpart, they will be directed by the federal NDs, and we certainly see them as far further left than what the Alberta Party would be.
Our next question comes from Michael Petricus again. What do you know personally about the Great Reset? That's in quotations, and then the, in again quotations, Fourth Industrial Revolution, spearheaded by Klaus Schwab, the founder of the World Economic Forum.
Well, I just started trying to do some reading about that, and of course that theory is that we're trying to get rid of all businesses and only having sort of supercells of businesses. And frankly, I'm a small business person myself. I belong to a great network of businesses in the city of Edmonton, and I can tell you, we're all individuals, and we're all working to make our businesses successful, and in doing so, ensuring that our employees have security. And so I can't tell you that I would say that is somebody's theory at this point in time, and that's not what I see in reality happening in the city of Edmonton, and I would say the province of Alberta, at least in the business world that I've been a part of.
Our next question comes from Timothy from the Lethbridge Herald. You said a balanced budget is important to the Alberta Party. How would you accomplish that? Increased taxations, cuts, a combination of both, or other measures? Please explain those measures if so.
Okay, so thanks, Timothy. It would be a combination of both. Certainly, as I mentioned, and that was just one example of frivolous spending, we need to prioritize where that spending is going to go. We do have, and we've started the discussion of what is the best way to balance the budget. We don't have a final position, but the talk on some sort of PST, harmonized sales tax, because we wouldn't want to try to create a whole new system, administrative system, to find that. That's on the table. But we also think that growing some of our businesses, for example, I know the UCP are finally on it, and the NDP, it took them a long time to come around, but we've been talking about the hydrogen economy and the opportunities with that for, I'm thinking, a year at least. It's been a long time, and there are other ways that we can position Alberta in a way of generating income and providing for our coffers, so that we can still provide the services that Albertans need. But it will be a combination, certainly. But we, as I said, we've put the PST, or the Harmonized Sales Tax, HST, on the table for discussion. We think it is not prudent not to put it there and to have input from Albertans. And so if you're asking, is this a party that's willing to support that? If we will make that final decision, but we are a party that's willing to make sure that we go out there and find the reasons to or not to do it. But if the reasons are, if the vote is to put it forward, we have no problem in saying it's up to Albertans, and here we are. We're willing to move on that for the future. Consumption tax, as you talk to any economist, is probably the most fair tax. We just had a session with Todd Hirsch, our Grand Prairie Constituency Associations, just this past week, talking about how do you position yourself for post-pandemic recovery again, and what should we be doing? And that certainly was part of the discussion.
Okay. The next question, you kind of answered it already, is from Trevor Page. What is your party's position on provincial sales tax? Maybe you can elaborate a little bit.
Well, it's hard to elaborate from that, but we certainly have put it on the table. We are looking at it. We've had a couple of calls. Carol Levis and also Mark Nakota have moderated, shared some sessions on that, and we are looking to see if that is the best solution. We've mentioned it in our past shadow budget that we are willing to explore that, and we're going to go forward. I don't have all the answers right now, but we're in the process of making that decision.
Our next question comes from Mark Goodall. What is your position regarding revenue shortfalls? Would you support a sales tax? I guess kind of the same question, maybe.
Yeah. And I think, so I'm just going to just say to that, because we're getting a few questions that way. Albertans want to talk about it. Albertans want to find a way out of this mess and ensure, as I said, for their children and their grandchildren, that there is an Alberta economy that's strong for them. And if that's one of the things that needs to happen, then we need a party with the courage to take that forward and not just say, for electability, I'm not going to do that. Now we realize right now that there is a need to have a vote on that, a plebiscite on that, but we also need to be putting forward a plan to say, if you had this sales tax, this is what you could expect. What's the level of exemption? When do people get a rebate? Because frankly, we don't think that at $75,000 for a dual income family, that's really that you really have an ability to provide for your family. So we need to know what those marks are as far as rebates, who doesn't get one. And so I guess I have to tell you that Albertans want the discussion. You're asking about it. We've heard that from many people. We don't know what the end result is, but we had better be talking about it. And we have too many parties in this province who are shying away from that particular discussion. Come on, we're adults here, and we need to find our way through this.
Okay, next question is from Bridge City News. We've heard a lot about pandemic burnout from Albertans. What's your take on Albertans who continue to defy the COVID-19 restrictions? But at the same time, how much longer can we keep this up?
I feel that way too, right? We started with a full tank of gas, and a year ago we did our best, and we were ready to try to do this. But because the goalposts keep getting moved on us, we're running out of that the gas in our tank to be able to make those adjustments. And I see so many people mentally, they just don't have the mental capacity any longer to be able to make those pivots and those adjustments. So I know the burnout is there, and I'm so tired of things going back and forth and back and forth. And as I said, it's because those goalposts keep getting moved on us. I want a good summer too. And I want us, okay, if these are the regulations right now, as a business owner, I will say to my staff, every change, you know the routine, let's go do it. And we need to do our best to ensure that. But I can see how people are tired. And if you go into rural Alberta, it's even more accentuated than it is in the city of Edmonton with respect to people just getting tired of having to make those changes. So I think this is people's last kick at the cat of their willingness to be all in. And yet, you know, we've lost so many lives that it's tragic. I don't know if I totally answered your question, but I'm at my wit's end too. And I think lots of Albertans are. So we're going to give it a shot as good as we can this time. And then we'll take a look at that in 3 weeks. And hopefully we've had enough regulation, and hopefully that there's been enforcement of the rules so that it's not sort of it's not really willy-nilly and no one's adhering to the rules and regulations, that we can go forward and enjoy the rest of our summer, because I don't know how much more anyone can take.
Okay, our next question comes from Denver, Florence. What's your favorite movie and why?
Oh, my favorite movie. Well, there are different favorite movies in many respects, but I do have to tell you a funny story. So, my love is tourism, particularly bringing people out to Alberta outside of Calgary and Edmonton, and I do these tours. And my very first tour that I wanted to do was to included the village of Chipman. And I went to Dave and I said, Dave, you know, in Coyote Ugly, it's all women that go on the tour. So I said to him, Dave, in Coyote Ugly, they dance on the bar. I want a picture with my tour, the group, the ladies that I'm going to bring. I want them up on the bar with a photo. And he goes, well, Jackie, this bar it's not going to hold one person, let alone a group of people. And I always had this sort of thought of Coyote Ugly because the symbol for the village of Chipman is a coyote. And by the time we actually got our tour there, about 4 months later, you know, when we had the group there, he had rebuilt the bar and we all got to sit and stand on the bar and have our photo taken. So to me, that's probably not my favorite movie, but it's very memorable in my life and it has somewhat of a connection. So, yeah, so I'll have to say that right now, if you ask for a movie, that's the one that's going to come to mind, just because of my personal experience there.
Okay. Knut Peterson, equalization, the carbon tax and climate change are contentious issues, especially in Alberta. What is your party's stance on those issues?
Well, equalization is negotiated, and it's unfortunate that when the current premier was in federal government, he created the dynamic, he created the policy that we're now following. So I think I'm not sure it's the party, but personally, I think that Alberta has to stand up for itself. But we have ways of doing that through negotiation. And I think we should stand up for ourselves. Quebec has done very well in defining itself as a province, and I think that we can too. But we are part of Canada, and I am Canadian. That's how I identify. So we need to work together with our government. And you know, right now we're probably on the receiving end of that equalization grant, and maybe we'll be a little more hesitant. But it wasn't, you know, the powers to be took advantage of us. That was when they actually established the current formula. And we do need to sit down and take a look at that. Climate change, I think, was the next part of that question.
Yeah, carbon tax and climate change.
Well, we've always had a position on carbon tax, even in the past, in our past election campaign, which I always have to say, you know, we did have about 10% of the vote in that last election. You know, unfortunately, it was spread across the province, and so we don't have the opportunity to have a member in the House. But we do represent a great many Albertans, and our position on the carbon tax at that point in time, and it hasn't changed, we haven't stepped forward to make any changes, was that it needed to be an Alberta-made solution. And we've been proven correct by the court saying that the federal government has the opportunity to put forward the tax. And so if we're going to have to live with the tax, we want to have the say. And that's where we've been for, goodness, since several years now.
Okay, our next question comes from Bev Mundell. What is your party's stance on Bill 70?
COVID liability is Bill 70, right? You know, we haven't talked about it. It's rather convenient that it was put forward when it was put forward, and so that doesn't sit very well with me. There have been a few other things that have occurred through this whole process, taking away the authority of the Chief Medical Officer of Health. That was taken away through legislation. And yeah, well, that was provincial, sorry, and that will go back to federal. We don't have a position. I don't think that we can be, I don't think you can wash our hands totally of all of this. So if I had a loved one that passed away because of some of the decisions, I'd be fighting. I mean, I did have an uncle who passed away, but that was in the United States. And so everyone's lives have been touched by COVID. But I don't think, I mean, people make decisions on the best information, but if they're not willing to share that information, we don't have the trust in our government that they are making that right decision. So I think all governments, federal, provincial, should have been more transparent in what they were using to make their decisions, because we have a nation, we actually globally even, it's of people who do not trust their politicians, and we need to change that.
Our next question comes from Knut Peterson. The UCP seem to have adopted an adversarial stance in dealing with health and education professionals and institutions. How would the Alberta Party deal with them and public service in general?
Well, as I said, I think we need to work with our partners, with fellow Albertans, and that includes the groups. We've always been there for the doctors. When Jason Kenney started to attack our doctors, we went out and we were talking to our doctors. We need to have them at the table when we are making those kinds of decisions that involve them and their livelihood. And frankly, as a former teacher, sorry, I'm mad at both of the parties that are in the legislature. There is a respect for teachers that is being destroyed by the current UCP government. I don't know if the premier had a terrible childhood education experience that he doesn't like teachers, but I know lots of people who respect their teachers and love their teachers, and teachers who work so hard to be able to engage their students, that I think that is a travesty. But the ND government, they messed up too. They used teachers. They held off signing their contract until after the last general election, when they could have actually sat down, negotiated, signed that contract, and teachers would not be in this mess that they're in right now, having to deal with a UCP government that hates, as I said, everything and anything involved in government, whether that's teachers, public servants. And and as I mentioned, our current premier is rather ironic. He has not, he has only held positions that are on the bequest of the that are sponsored or paid for by the public purse, with the exception of his Taxpayers Association that he went out and established. And I remember that. This is how much it ages me, but we just started our business then on 118th Avenue, 42nd Street in Edmonton. He walked door to door to door, from business to business, saying how bad the federal government was and that businesses needed to support his new association with their dollars so he could stand up to the federal government. I remember that still to this day, and I don't know why, but obviously it's left a bit of a taste in my mouth.
Okay, and that was it for the questions. Although Beth Mundell does make the comment that Bill 70 reduces the liability of long-term care facilities in Alberta for deafs.
Yes. Yeah, I'm sorry. Yes, it does. That's right. And there were some decisions that they made, and I can just have a second here, that were not acceptable. They should have used the dollars, but then again, that's part of the provincial direction of paying appropriately, ensuring that the people who were working with our long-term care residents were properly protected and also educated in what it is that they have to do. So I don't think they can just rub their hands and absolve all long-term care facilities. There were decisions that they made individually and independently. So I think it needs a better look at that. And I wouldn't just do a blanket statement that they're allowed to be absolved of liability. Sorry, it's been a long hour, right? And I'm going back and forth here.
No worries. Thank you so much for joining us today. Before we end the live stream today, do you have a take-home message for us?
Well, I believe that we need to re-engage Albertans. We need to build their trust, and we need to listen to Albertans and be prepared to make some changes. The party that I am representing, the Alberta Party, is such a party that is willing to put egos aside and to really work for the betterment of Alberta and for Albertans. So please join us.
Lovely. There's a couple of thank yous in the queue. Specifically, Laura Schultz. Jacquie, thank you for speaking to SACPA this morning and sharing the Alberta Party's approach. Very much appreciated. On behalf of SACPA, we appreciate you joining us this hour and for making the time to do so. And for everybody who's online, I hope you'll join us next week when we have Don McIntyre. How can past and present injustices against Indigenous people be reconciled? And that's next Thursday at 10 a.m. again. So I hope to see you then. That's it for today. Thanks, folks.